It's not the same to physically harm someone as it is to write a headline about them that might hurt their feelings. Hi there, my name is Antoinette Chanel. For people who are just meeting me for the first time, welcome and thank you so much for stopping in. For my day ones who have been here on this channel, subscribed for years now and have been wondering what the heck I'm doing, so do I. Here I am once again making a stab at YouTube videos. I've tried this a few times before, but I see so much happening in the world right now that I really want to comment on. Rather than going into comment sections, I want to form my own content that expresses the opinions that I have, and so that's part of the reason why I'm back right now. I also am now working as a publisher, so my small business, Feathered Press Indie Publisher, we produce books for independent authors, and I've been running that for almost a year now. And so I'm going to start doing more interviews with the authors that I work with and letting them share their story and talk about what the process was of going through their book creation from concept to finished product. So you'll be seeing some of that on this channel. Also, I'll be weighing in on certain issues that I have opinions on, because I feel like that's a better use of my time than sitting around stewing on things. I also would love to create content that is useful to some of the people who follow me. I get a lot of Black women who come to me to write and produce and publish their books. And I see a lot happening with young Black women right now that I'd really like to address. And so that's another part of why I'm coming back to YouTube right now. So yay, here I am. And this first video, I actually wanted to do a comprehensive review of Prince Harry's book, Spare. Now, I did not purchase this book. I actually got a copy of it through an app called Libby. Shout out to Libby if you've not heard of it. Libby is an app that works with your local library, so all you need is a library card. You can get your card and then search through their library, and if they have an audiobook available, such as Spare by Prince Harry, I also listened to I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy and several other books. I've listened to Brene Brown on there. It's a really nice app, and I like that you can get access to audiobooks for free. But let's get into this review of Prince Harry's book. So first and foremost, the reason why I wanted to provide my own commentary on this book is because I was seeing so much sensationalist coverage of this book in the news, and I got curious, quite honestly. I wanted to know if it was really just as bad as the news was saying. Is he really out here slandering his family and his in-laws, and you know what's going on with this? All of this royal nonsense that's been happening has been, in my opinion, a bad look. All of the back and forth. I don't have a dog in this fight, so if you came here hoping that I would go in on Prince Harry and Meghan and rip them to shreds, probably going to be disappointed. If you came here thinking that I was going to be rooting for William and Kate and going hard for the crown, again, you must not have met me before, but yeah, I'm not really going to do that. I'm going to do my best to just present what it is that I observed that was happening in this book and the fallout that has been happening since in the press. So without further ado, here we go. So the book is broken up into 3 separate parts. And really quick, before I get too far into this, you might see me glance off to the side a little bit because I'm looking at my computer at the notes that I've written down, because this is a long book that I listened to. I think it was like 15 and a half hours. But the first part of the book, it's in 3 parts. The first part of the book really covers his biographical details up until the time when his mother was killed. And so I remember that one part that really stood out was when Harry was talking about how the best day of his life was on August 30th, 1997, which would have been the day before Diana's accident and death. And he said that he was having a good time with his brother and his father. They were on vacation, enjoying themselves, and everything just seemed right with the world. And then all of a sudden, the next thing he knew, his mother was in this accident and she was declared dead, but he didn't really believe that at first, which I can understand. Prince Harry and I are the same age, so I am 38. He is also currently 38. And I know that if I had lost my parent at age 13, I probably would have been very devastated and in disbelief as well. My grieving process would have been all over the board. So no criticisms there. He talks about the relationship that he had with his brother, who he refers to as Willie, reflects on the times that they had together. I know that the news had reported that he was going on about how William always had the best room and William always got the richest chocolates to eat and William was treated with all of this respect because he was the heir. But I didn't find that when I was listening to the audiobook. I mean, he definitely refers to his brother as the heir, and therefore his safety, his well-being, and his development was different from Harry's because that's just how it goes. He was being prepped for the throne as soon as he was born, whereas Harry, not so much, because the likelihood of him ever sitting down to the throne is slim to none. He really did refer to his brother in loving ways. I don't have siblings, but if I did have siblings, I would imagine that a lot of this would be relatable. The things that he was saying were not things that were outside of things that I've heard my friends say about their siblings, as far as the rivalry and wanting to be the best, wanting to be the fastest, wanting to be the strongest, all of those different things. And he also refers to his mother and his connection with her as something that was very sacred, very cherished, that he is very clearly still missing. And again, I can't blame him for that either. I was definitely drawn into his story and his biography by the way that part one was presented. Part one, and actually all of the parts, have over 70 chapters in them. So this book was pretty long. As I said, it was 15 and a half hours on audiobook. There were a lot of reports in the news that talked about how Harry was making all of these unfavorable comparisons between he and William. I didn't really get that sense in part one. I also did not get the sense that he was trying to speak negatively about his father. Anytime he spoke about his father, he was honest in terms of saying that his father wasn't like his mother. So his nature was not the most emotional and affectionate, if you will. He does talk about, there were few times that they really hugged. And his father referred to him as dear boy, repeatedly several times. That's just what King Charles calls his second son. But I did not get the sense that Harry was trying to drone on and complain about that so much as just kind of setting up what his life was like. And I can appreciate that because these were things that I really wasn't dying to know Prince Harry's biography, but at the same time, it was interesting to listen to. It was also interesting to hear him talk about the way that the monarchy is run and just the hierarchy of things, the environments that he was in, these different royal palaces and just how beautiful they are and how decked out they are. I enjoyed listening to those details because it was kind of fascinating to hear him describe what some of these places look like and things like that. Part one, I don't really have a lot of complaints. I got the sense that Harry was deeply saddened by the loss of his mother, which is understandable. He had a rivalry, very much like most brothers would, with his brother. He referred to his mother's passing in just very devastating ways. And that was one part that did stick out in part one, is that he talked about what it felt like that day walking behind the casket as it was being drawn through town, and there were so many onlookers, and he talks about being a go-between for people's grief because he was taking flowers from people and then setting them on the lawn so that they could be on display there, and he sort of felt like he was this vehicle for the people and their grief. And he talks about shaking hands and how their hands were wet because these people were crying. Harry also does say that he did not cry in that moment, even though he wanted to. He was questioning why he wasn't, but he also said that at that point he wasn't totally convinced that his mother was dead. So then we get over to part two, and one thing I will say is that in part one he spoke a little bit about the presence of the press and the paparazzi and this accident that his mother was in that claimed her life that he's still not totally sure about yet because he was in denial about that for a long time. Oh, there is one thing that I want to say. He never once actually said that his mother had given him an Xbox in 1997. And I think that that is one of the most blatant examples that I can point to for how the press coverage of this book has been just wildly all over the board. I've seen on both sides of the spectrum. I've seen where people are coming out in praise of this book and claiming that it's the greatest thing ever. It's also been dubbed the fastest selling nonfiction book, which I question that, but I'll get to that part a little later. But he says very clearly right before talking about his birthday in 1997 that after his mother died, his concept of time became very skewed, and his memories from that period of time, the late 90s to the early 2000s, are very jumbled. And so when he says, I got a box from someone who said that Mummy was setting this aside for my birthday, she had bought it earlier and she saved it for me, and for some reason I opened it up and I thought it was an Xbox. I think he's speaking ironically there. I don't think that he's trying to say that in 1997 his mother got him an Xbox, which, I mean, the Xbox came out in what, 2001? And I got the sense that Harry was very aware of that. He wasn't trying to say that, no, I got a copy of the Xbox. I got my hands on an Xbox console before everybody else did. I got the sense that he was just trying to imply that his memories were so skewed after his mother's death that that's what things looked like for him at one point as he reflects back. But he wasn't trying to imply that he got the first ever Xbox or anything like that. I think people really took that out of context and ran with it and tried to make it into something really ugly. Those are my thoughts on part one. Let's move over to part two. So in part two, he starts off with speculating a lot more on fame and paparazzi. Here is where I sort of started to get a little more critical of the book, simply because it seems like an overarching theme of this book overall is just to complain about the presence of the paparazzi, complain about what the media does. And he talks about that in conjunction with his mother's death. Partway through part two is when he starts to accept that she has passed away. She's no longer here. He says that he was in his 20s when he finally realized that, and he had had a conversation with William about it. But what I didn't like, and what seemed to be happening through several parts of this book, were that it seemed like Harry was trying to equate the accident that Diana had with what the press does. And I know that at the time, we as in, you know, us commoners, us regular people out here, we were very much questioning, you know, why was the paparazzi allowed to be so aggressive with their pursuit of her? That contributed to this accident. If she hadn't been running to try to get away from their cameras, then this wouldn't have happened. And this is backed up by a speech that George Clooney made at the time.
This is not about me. But as I sit in front of my TV listening to tabloid journalists and editors dodging their own responsibility and placing the blame on a drunken driver or society or Princess Di, I now feel that the only...
What it has to do with is responsibility, and are you going to be responsible for your actions? And, you know, and that's sort of what it was. And that was the thing I think that people are still mystified by is, you know, it's bad enough that they chased her, and probably dumb that he ran the way he did, as fast as he did.
Innocence. Princess Di is dead. And who should we see about that?
But I don't know if it is... I feel like he makes a false equivalency by tying her accident to the media and the kinds of things that they will say. Because in several places throughout this book, Harry talks about how the media is dangerous and they make threats, and the need for security for he and his family, and just how unsafe the paparazzi makes them feel. But the paparazzi making you feel unsafe is not the same as like a high-speed chase pursuit that unfortunately ends in an accident. I mean, that's just reckless behavior right there, but that is not the same as printing a headline that has falsehoods in it. And so that was something that I took issue with as I was listening to the audiobook, because it felt like he wanted to claim that it's the media's dishonesty that killed Diana, And that's not really what it was. The pursuit, the high-speed chase, the fact that she wasn't wearing a seatbelt in the car, the fact that there's been speculation about her driver being under the influence at the time that he was driving, the speed that they were going. There were a lot of other things that are very separate from fictitious headlines that publications want to put out about people. Part 2 of Spare was also a very interesting listen for me, because that's where Prince Harry gets into his experiences with the military. And I have to say that that is one of the things that I have always respected the most about him, was the fact that he did serve in the military, and he didn't make like a big deal about it. He wasn't trying to get a bunch of attention or clout off of it. He just did his service, and that was it. And I can appreciate that. I'm sure that the people who served with him probably could appreciate that too. With that being said, there were some parts in part 2 that I also was kind of given the side eye. For instance, when he goes on his first deployment, it doesn't sound like he had anybody else with him looking out for him necessarily, but he also was not serving in positions within the military that were of the most risk. So I'm not saying that he didn't serve or that he wasn't ever in danger, because he was, but he wasn't placed in the most dangerous of positions, partially because of who he was. And, that was one part that stood out to me, especially when he talked about his second deployment, because on his second deployment, he said that he was able to take bodyguards with him on his second deployment because there was room for them, which, again, military service, very admirable and respectable, but the reality is having bodyguards with you while you're on deployment means that your risk is significantly reduced. And I have to wonder, how tactical can you possibly be when you've got these other 2 people with you as a detail? I would think that that would become a liability at some point if you are in an area where combat is happening and you don't want to give up your position, you don't want to give up information about your side and where you guys are going and whatnot. I would think that that would be really difficult and tricky. And so I could understand if some of the people who served with him, who, from what I understand, nobody who has served with him, I haven't heard commentary from them that is in the negative. They've spoken very nicely about Prince Harry and about their time serving with him. But I would imagine that some of the other soldiers who were looking at him were just kind of like, okay, well, we don't get bodyguards. This is a war that we're out here fighting. I guess that's to come with the territory if you are someone like Prince Harry. It was also in part 2 of Spare that Prince Harry talked about wanting to find a place for himself in this world as far as what he was supposed to do. William is the heir, so therefore William has certain responsibilities and duties to the royal family and to the crown that are separate from anything that Harry is going to have to do. And so, he talks about kind of floating through existence at one point. He's continuing to get agitated with the paparazzi in part 2. He's continuing to question why they are able to publish headlines that are not true about certain people. And he gives a few instances of things that were not accurate as they were reported by the paparazzi. In part 2, he also mentions meeting Kate, when William met Kate, and then when he met Kate and the relationship that they had, which he spoke about Kate very glowingly. He talks about how she was kind, about how her reserved, silly side found his, always out in the open, silly side that, likes to joke and stuff. And I thought that that was a really nice nod to their relationship. I know that the media is speculating that there is a rift between them. I have no idea. I don't talk to any of these people. They're way above my pay grade. But my impression was never that Harry had an issue with Kate. I think that he was very happy that his brother had met someone. I think that he approved of her. He does even say in the book in part 2 that Diana would have loved Kate. So in that regard, I felt like he was definitely not trying to take shots at her, at least not in part 2. And I was happy for that, because I personally don't like to see when any family is going through major drama like that, but the idea that Harry would somehow dislike or have a vendetta against Kate just sounded really just horrible to me, because I don't know, we've all just kind of we were introduced to her and she was lovely, and she's, been William's wife, and their children are here, and Kate is a fixture now to people, even though I don't live in the UK, but even over here in the United States, anything I've ever known about Princess Kate has always been really glowing and wonderful. And, you know, she's not a Diana-like figure, but she's a beautiful woman, and she's William's wife and the mother of their children. As he is reflecting on his need for structure, his need for finding a purpose and things like that, you know, that's when it comes to light that he's going to serve in the military. And he talks about the observations that he made, especially as he was going to places like Africa and seeing just how deeply the people there were suffering, seeing just what nature was like and what it would serve up to him. I was very fascinated listening to those parts. I enjoyed the friendships that he talks about that he made when he was in the military. It seems like he had some lasting bonds that he formed with people who he really respected. It just sounds like all in all, his time in the military was really good for him, and I'm glad for that. And of course, out of that, we have the Invictus Games, which is just an absolute wonderful creation. I think it's a great space for people who have served in the military, who have been hurt, but who are still very capable of doing things. I think it's awesome that they get to showcase their abilities through something like the Invictus Games, and that was created by Prince Harry. I definitely enjoyed part 2. He talks about William being drunk on his wedding day. I mean, I'm not mad at him for that. I mean, maybe he was supposed to be completely sober. They did a walkabout earlier in the day before William got married. And apparently Harry did not serve as William's best man, but one of William's friends did. But they reported that way in the news. I can see why the news would want to do that. I mean, it's an endearing story to hear that, you know, these boys who we saw walking behind their mother's casket in the 90s, you know, one of them's getting married and the other one is supporting him. I think that that's really beautiful. So even though that was an inaccuracy, I didn't really take issue with it. And I didn't get the sense that Harry took issue with it either. I think he was mainly just trying to make an example out of, you know, these are some of the lies that the press has told, some of the inaccuracies that they have fabricated for the rest of the world to consume. I got the sense that he was using that instance of him not actually being the best man as just illustrating his point about how the media can be dishonest. But again, as I said earlier, I think that the dangerous part is when he starts to conflate media dishonesty with threats and danger being put upon his mother or him or his wife, as we will get to later in this review. So up until part 3, I really was following along. I was very engaged. I was, you know, starting to root for Harry at one point, especially as his brother got married. And again, he didn't make any commentary in the book about how he felt jealous or he felt like Kate was taking William away. He celebrated their wedding in his book, and I have a feeling he did that in real life too. There was a huge drop-off for me when part 3 of the book began. I felt like up until that point, I was getting all of this autobiography stuff from Prince Harry about his life, about what it felt like to lose his mom, what it felt like to grow up without her, what it felt like to sort of wrestle with the truth about her death, what it felt like to watch his brother step into his role as the future heir, what it felt like to go off into the military and the things he saw, that he learned, the friends that he made, you know, him contemplating his purpose and trying to figure out, where do I fit? What can I do in this world? Because I have to have a place. So let me figure out what it is that I like and what I'm interested in and what I'm good at. I was really just following along and enjoying the book for what it was up until part 3. Part 3 just took a massive turn. And in my opinion, part 3 read and sounded like it was coming from either another book or another author. Now, I know that, let's see, I don't have it pulled up right here, but there was a ghostwriter. There he is. J.R. Moehringer was the ghostwriter who worked with Prince Harry for Spare. Talented man. I definitely was enthralled, and being that I am also a fellow author and a publisher and fellow ghostwriter, I was very drawn in by the linguistic styling that they were using in parts 1 and 2. I felt like the storytelling was skillfully done, even if there were parts of it that I took issue with or that I was critical of. As I was listening to this audiobook, at one point, somewhere between parts 1 and 2, I felt like every time I would turn it on and put my AirPods in, it was like sitting down to not a phone call with Prince Harry, but like he's just sitting here talking to me, telling his whole life story. It seemed relatable and believable. That's why part 3 really just stood out as kind of a, whoa, it's like a glaring red flag that everything is so different now. So as you can probably guess, by part 3, after he's gone through the earliest parts of his life and talking about his 20s, the military, William getting married, finding his purpose, we get to part 3, and that's where we are introduced to this new woman who he meets, Megan. Now, prior to part 3 and talking about meeting Megan and how they started dating and things like that, he did mention some of his other romantic relationships prior to Megan. When he spoke about these women, he spoke about them in very respectable ways. I didn't get the sense that he was trying to brag. I didn't get the sense that they were notches on his belt necessarily. He talks about his girlfriend Chelsea, who he had known before. There was another girl, Cressida, I think he mentioned. There were a few women that he talks about who he dated, and I apologize for not having all of the names down, but there was a blonde girl that he had dated. I think that was Cressida, and there was another girl that he had dated who unfortunately took her own life a few years ago. Caroline something. I can't remember her name right now, and I don't have it pulled up on my notes. I apologize, not trying to be disrespectful, but in his references to these relationships, he reflected on them fondly. And what I noticed about those relationships in particular was that when he talked about them starting, like when he would meet these women and just, how the conversation went as they were sort of forming the beginnings of their relationship together, it was always something that was very gradual and very, I didn't know what it would be, but I figured I'd check it out and see. It was a very gradual growing and blossoming, and that's what made it so believable. I am someone who's been married for, this April, it will be 14 years that my husband and I have been married. And so, be that as it is, I reflect back on our own story and I see how it gradually grew into this beautiful tree of love that we have and share right now. I also have friends who met their significant others around the same time that I met my husband, and similarly, you can see the gradual growth and progression in their relationships. Not all of these people have children. Not all of these people are living the same kind of life that he and I are living, my husband and I, but it's a very similar start. Get to know you. Do I like you? Yes, I'm in. Okay, let's grow this thing. And then boom, it's, a big old story that is now history because they've been together for years. All very relatable and very believable. In part 3, when he introduces his relationship with Megan, it was so boom, 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 boom. Like it all rapidly progressed, and it went from this woman that he had met who was an actress to all of a sudden just this embodiment of his mother and the second coming of Diana and the only person in the world who seems to understand him, and just I don't know, it struck me as very over the top. I mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't happy when he met his wife and wasn't elated and that they didn't have a relationship progression just like anyone else. I know that they did. It's just, I'm saying that the way that he illustrates that in his book, it seemed like the relationship with Megan was just really quickly fast-tracked into, this is the love of my life and my soulmate, and there wasn't a whole lot of in-between. And I sort of got the sense that he was talking about his relationship in ways that people sometimes do on social media when they're trying to convince other people that a relationship is real and genuine and beautiful, and look at us, we're in love, and it's Valentine's Day, which today it's actually Valentine's Day, and going over the top with social media posts, all the bears and the candies and the gifts and the date and all that stuff, and it just kind of seemed like that. It seemed like he was putting a lot of extra sauce on his descriptions of the earliest parts of their relationship and how he perceived her, almost in a way to make the rest of us see Megan as this saintly creature and see their relationship as this fairy tale romance that just, by chance just happened to blossom and they became this wonderful item together. And I don't know, I wasn't really buying any of it. And he talks about, I gotta look at my notes here, he talks about how when he met her, she wanted to be free. Also, at a certain point in part 3, he talks about how when he met Megan, she actually had a favorite spot located in London. She said that that's where she goes all the time when she's in London, and that she's in London quite a bit, which I found a little odd because I know that in several interviews that Megan has done, she has claimed that she didn't know anything about the royals, didn't know anything about who Prince Harry was, didn't know anything about the family. If she's spending time in London, it seems like she would know. I mean, I've never been to London myself, and I know who these people are. I know who Diana was. I know the fallout of when he was Prince Charles and he had the affair with Camilla, and you know, all of the negativity that came out about that and the comparisons that the news was making between Diana and Camilla. I know about that, and I mean, I'm the same age as Prince Harry, so that means that I'm around the same age as Meghan. I think she's 3 years older than him. So then that would mean that she would have been hearing about all of these things in 1997 too. Plus, if she's always spending time in London, then it just kind of seems like, okay, well, how is it that you never ever knew anything about the royal family? And this has been debunked by several other people too. There are other commentary channels on here, people who are actually connected with the royal family who have given their commentary about Meghan and some of the moves that she was making prior to knowing Harry that illustrate and indicate that she very clearly knew some things about the royal family, and that she also had a fondness for just royal life in general. She had a blog, it was a lifestyle blog that she was running prior to getting married to Prince Harry, and she had done an article about Kate and the wedding and how every girl wants to be a princess. So knowing those details and then hearing the way that this relationship started and what he thought of her and the sorts of things that she was telling him that I guess he took as fact, really raised a lot of red flags to me. I didn't see how it was that she could have a favorite place to hang out in London, but also not know anything about the royals or about who Harry is. Prince Harry also takes issue with a headline that was run soon after he and Meghan decided to go public with their relationship, which was sometime around 2016 or 2017. I wasn't clear on exactly when that was. I guess I could have looked up the article. I'll try to make sure that I have an image that I can show of the headline, and it'll have the date with it. But basically, they were drawing these comparisons because it had gotten out that Meghan was half black and half white, and so they had run this headline, something about like her family, Compton goes to the royal, I don't remember, I just know that it was something that was racially it had racial undertones and it was very disrespectful, and I didn't think that Harry was being over the top in his critical appraisal of that headline and what they were trying to do with that story. And so he called this out, and he said that he made a statement about it sometime around 2016, like I said. He is quoted as saying in the book, "People have strong feelings about what's happening to her, Pa." I personally don't remember this. I'm not saying that the headline is a complete lie, but what I am saying is that I don't remember people having strong feelings about their relationship in 2016, 2017. I don't remember hearing anything about their relationship until they got engaged. That's when all of the headlines, the barrage of pictures, the ring, the interview that they did on that couch, which I think was at Nottingham Cottage, all of those things came out after the engagement. Prior to the engagement, I don't remember hearing anything about Meghan and Harry or seeing pictures of Meghan and Harry. So, you know, maybe that's just my ignorance over here in the United States. Maybe I was just paying attention to other things at that time. I would have been pregnant in 2016 and the earliest part of 2017 because I had my son in March. And so maybe I was concentrating on my pregnancy and I just missed it. I don't know, but I did not remember people having strong feelings like that. I think that there was a news story and it had a pretty crappy headline, and Harry had the palace put out a statement about that to address it, which I think was appropriate. And then that was kind of it. I mean, I don't really remember there being much else as far as fanfare is concerned, but that was one thing that he mentioned, and I don't remember that. And then what started to happen in part 3, and this is the other piece of this whole false equivalency that Prince Harry does throughout Spare that I took issue with. He talks a lot about how the press was so disrespectful to Meghan and disrespectful to their relationship when it started, and how he couldn't just sit back and let these things happen to his future wife or his girlfriend or whatever. And he says that his father and his brother mentioned to him that, you know, this is what Camilla had to go through and this is what Kate had to go through. Our girlfriends went through it, so why are you wanting us to protect your girlfriend? I kind of have to agree with that, because as I was listening, I really didn't hear about any physical threats coming to Meghan as part of what the paparazzi was doing. Now, this is prior to them having their children. This is prior to the wedding and a little bit after the wedding. But Prince Harry keeps talking about all of these news stories that keep coming out about how Meghan is bossy and Meghan this and Meghan that. And specifically, he says that after they did their Australian tour, which I think was the first tour that Meghan ever went on, or it was the only one that she went on, afterwards, after everyone loved her in Australia, then all of a sudden all of these really negative stories started being put out that he insinuates that the palace was behind. They were putting out these stories about Meghan, about how she's a bully, about how she doesn't get along with the staff, about how she doesn't show respect, things like that. But he's talking about it in a way as if these people are physically attacking her, like these papers are physically attacking her and making her physical well-being, placing that in harm in some way. And I really do take issue with making that sort of an equivalency, because Prince Harry and Meghan also want to stand on the platform of being crusaders against racism and crusaders against injustice and people who are looking out for the voices of those who are marginalized. They've accepted an award for this, and I haven't really heard them speak in the contrary. They very much are comfortable with their perception as being leaders of doing this kind of work. And for people who know me, who know what I'm about, you know that I am a children's book. I'm a total author. So I write children's books. I also write nonfiction books. But the book that really put me on the map was a book for Black girls, which I wrote to give as a love letter to other little Black girls, because it contains messages that I wish that I could have heard as I was growing up. I didn't have very much encouragement as I was growing up to just be myself and do what made me happy. So I wanted to leave that behind in my children's book. Racial work is something that I don't get the luxury of running from, because I live in this skin. I live in this beautiful dark skin that covers my whole body, which means that when racism comes to my door or confronts me while I'm out shopping or flies into my email inbox, or, you know, whatever the case may be, I don't have the luxury of just being like, oh, well, I'm not Black, so I just walk away from it. It's what I have to live with. It's what my children have to live with as being mixed race children. So I don't really like that Prince Harry is trying to make a case in Spare for Meghan being harshly punished for her Blackness, and that somehow creating a physical threat against her and eventually their whole family. I think that that's going over the top a little bit too much, especially as we look at Meghan's history and we can see that she herself has engineered a lot of these paparazzi opportunities so that she can get her name into the papers. And so I really have to question, like, first of all, it's not the same to physically harm someone as it is to write a headline about them that might hurt their feelings. And second of all, I really don't think that people are harping on this Blackness stuff as much as you seem to be focusing on it and as much as Meghan seems to be focusing on it. It's sort of like they're trying to use racial issues as a means for elevating themselves and elevating their position, because it creates a window of victimhood for the both of them. And victimhood, I mean, my goodness, victimhood is so easy to play off in the press and to garner into something bigger for yourself if you have a brand that you're building, if you are, trying to get your business off the ground. And I really just am not a fan of that. It's one thing to speak out about disrespectful headlines and the way that people are being treated and perceived unfairly in the news because of racism. That's one thing. But it's a totally separate thing altogether for you to then claim that this is somehow created this unimaginable threat that is against you and your family, that you guys are going to die because of the way that these people are writing these headlines about you and they come at you and your family. I haven't heard about any physical altercations between Meghan and the paparazzi or their children, any paparazzi getting close to their children. I've not heard about that. So I'm not really understanding the equivalence that he's trying to make there. The sense of urgency just seems off to me. Also, in part 3 is when we do start hearing very negative appraisals of his father, his brother, his sister-in-law. He doesn't speak negatively about the Queen in Spare, and I have a feeling that some of the more critical commentary about the late Queen might have been taken out of Spare as she passed away in September of 2022. I know that there were reports that they were scrambling to change things about both the Netflix series as well as the book after the Queen passed away. Now, again, those could also be just fake headlines. It might not actually be true, but I sort of got the sense that they were true because I saw them delaying their projects and delaying the release of these projects because they said that they needed to do some editing and reworking certain parts of these after the Queen had passed away. Who knows? There might have been more negative stuff in the book about his grandmother, but in part 3 especially is when he starts to describe how he and William do not see eye to eye. They got into several arguments about Meghan and her demeanor. At one point, William confronting Meghan himself about her demeanor, her behavior. Prince Harry speaks negatively about Kate and how Kate acts around Meghan. He talks about the lip gloss incident, which to me didn't seem like a really big deal. He didn't play it off like, well, yeah, he did. He played it off like this lipstick thing that happened between the two of them was like this really huge deal. So apparently before some function, and I think that Kate was pregnant at this time, so, she's got to look out for herself and not let random germs get into her body. But apparently before this function, Meghan had turned around and asked Kate, could you please let me borrow your lip gloss? And she squeezed a little bit of the lip gloss onto her finger, put it onto her lips, handed the lip gloss back to Kate. And that was the end of it. I'm not really sure why this needed to end up in the book, but I feel like he was trying to call more attention to this moment in the book to say that, oh, see, this is where I'm showing you that Kate didn't like Meghan from the start and she wasn't treating her fairly. Honestly, it sounded like a non-incident to me. I don't think, she might have hesitated just a little bit because she's like, wait, what did she just ask me? Oh, my lip gloss. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, give her the lip gloss. I could see that happening, but it really did not seem like this big, huge moment. And I was wondering, why is this being given space in your book? Amongst other things. So let's see. Let me take a look at my notes here. Let's see. He describes Meghan as being fierce about women's issues, which was another comment that I wanted to make light of. I didn't have any knowledge of Meghan's history with philanthropy. I did not know that she had done very much charity work. And even as I look back on her history, I can only see maybe 1 or 2 different events that she did for charity where she was called in to be a speaker or she was invited to an event where several other people who are also in the entertainment industry were being invited. So I'm not going to say she didn't do any philanthropy whatsoever, but what's interesting is that in Spare, Prince Harry is making it a point to talk about all of the unfair treatment that Meghan was receiving because she was different, because she was American, because she had gotten divorced, because she had a black parent, things like that. And then he also mentions that Serena Williams, the beautiful tennis queen, Serena Williams, is Meghan's bestie. Yet I thought that there was a missed opportunity there to maybe unpack how racism is played out in the media, especially because one of the Commonwealth countries, continents, if you will, Australia, was very racist in how they portrayed Serena Williams sometime around 2018 when Serena was playing against Naomi Osaka. That was actually the first moment where we learned about Naomi Osaka. And the portrayals of Serena in the media were showing her looking very overweight and just beastly, just very out of control. Like it was disgusting the way that they were portraying Serena in the media at that time. And her husband, Alexis Ohanian, came out in complete support of his wife, and he made a statement in support of her that I thought was very beautiful. It was not fair the way that the officials in that game, as well as the media, were treating Serena over that incident. If Serena is Megan's bestie, then it kind of seems like there would have been more insight into just how racist the media can be and how ugly it can look. And I felt like there was a missed opportunity to make an example of some of these things. Let's point to some examples of where the media can be completely disgusting in how they portray people just based on racial stereotypes. I felt like there was a missed opportunity for that, especially if Serena and Meghan are as close as what Harry is claiming in this book and as what they both portrayed as they were leading up to their wedding together. It seems like if that's your bestie and your bestie's been through something similar, why not make an example of that to show that even some of the greatest athletes among us have to deal with this and how unfair it is, because it also influences the perception that other people have. There were also some questionable details mentioned in part 3, specifically around, the births of Archie and Lilibet. One of the areas of the book, he describes the birth of one of his children. I can't remember which one it was, but he says that after she had the baby, they were back at Frogmore within 2 hours. And I thought, okay, but didn't you also just say that she had an epidural? Mentioning how she needed an epidural. She was in a pool for a little while in a tub for water birth, and then she got out. Sounds like she got the epidural, and then 2 hours later you were back at Frogmore? Okay, I remember when I got my epidural when I had my first child, and I was numb from my waist to my mid-thigh for at least 4 hours. I wasn't able to get up to use the bathroom. I had to ask the nursing staff to help me get to the bathroom. And even then, I got stuck on the toilet. I needed help getting off. It was a crazy, crazy time, but I was not at all mobile. And so for her to be back at home, I just have to question, well, did she really have an epidural or what was going on? Another instance that he described when his first child was born was about how he had used up all of the laughing gas while waiting for things to get started with Megan's labor with Archie. And I thought, wow, that reads so selfishly that your wife is laboring right now and going through a whole bunch of stuff that presumably this is her first time. I don't think Megan had any other children before Archie. So she's going through this for the first time. And when you're a first time mom going through labor, it's scary. You don't know what the heck's going on with your body. You just know that you feel things you've never felt before. And so he's over here taking up all of the laughing gas. My impression was that was so selfish of him to do and immature. In part 3, also, Harry talks about going to therapy and needing help with sort of coping with the loss of his mother and confronting his feelings about that already, getting past some of the agitation and I think maybe even depression that he was experiencing as his dynamic was starting to change with the rest of his family, as he brought his wife in and she brought a whole new energy to his life, to the royal family, and he talks about needing to go and see someone. I think it's great that Prince Harry went and got therapy, but they told us in 2020 or was it 21? I think it was the Oprah interview in 2021, that she couldn't get therapy. Meghan couldn't get therapy because it was a bad look for the family. So I have to wonder, because he says in part 3 that Meghan was the one who told him that he needed to go and talk to someone. So his new wife, fiance, new wife, they were married at this point, is encouraging him to go and seek therapy. And prior to this, he had also seen a therapist, spoken with someone about his feelings with his mom, about some of the things that he saw when he was in the military. So this wasn't like it was his first time going to therapy. But I just found it interesting that, okay, so you were able to get help and go to therapy, and Meghan even told you to go, but then you guys told us in 2021 that she wasn't allowed to go to therapy. I just have to question why. Why would it be different for her when you're more high profile than she is? So that means that people seeing you going to a therapist is going to probably create more waves for the royal family than seeing her go to therapy. That just seemed like a really weird discrepancy to me. I have to question, what was really going on there with your access to therapy. Did you not have access? Was she not allowed to? Or was it something that she chose not to do because she didn't want to? And then he also describes a fight. This is that physical altercation that he describes having with William. And I'm going to quote a similar passage or line that I've heard other people quoting, which is that he grabbed me by the collar, ripping my necklace, and he knocked me to the floor. I don't know if they fought or not. I have no idea. I wasn't there. I didn't live at Knotcott, nor did I live at Frogmore. I'm not privy to these things. But I did find the description of him wearing a necklace as opposed to him wearing a chain. I might have missed that whole last part because I covered my microphone. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. This fight between William and Harry, I have no idea if it happened or not. I have no idea the severity of it. But I do know that if your brother physically attacked you and you felt like you couldn't be safe around him because he was now, posing a physical threat, I don't know why you wouldn't have called the authorities. It's not legal for anybody to attack anybody. So why wouldn't you get the authorities involved in that? Make sure that William gets charged. I feel like at a certain point that's gotta stop. And also I can point to several instances where Kate was dragged in the media when her and William were just dating. King Charles, when he was Prince Charles and he had an affair and he had Camilla, and people got a look at Camilla and felt like she was not as good looking as Diana, so what the hell are you thinking? They drug him and Camilla in the news. So, and I mean, horrible things that they said about them. I saw headlines about Pippa Middleton, Kate's sister, and all of the things that they would drum up about her and things like that. So I don't know. I don't really believe that this physical altercation between you and William happened and you just took it, you just didn't do anything, you just whatever, I'm just here. I don't know, that seems like it's taking things a little bit too far, and I do question the terminology of using necklace as opposed to chain. Most men that I speak to, when they talk about anything that they wear around their neck, jewelry, it's a chain, it's not a necklace. I've not heard any man refer to any jewelry that he wore around his neck as a necklace. Necklaces are more feminine, those are for women. But twice in part 3, Harry describes his neck jewelry as a necklace, which I raised my eyebrow and I have to wonder, was this J.R. Moehringer who was continuing to do the ghostwriting here, or was this Meghan's publicist who might have dabbled in part 3 a little bit in order to make herself look like a sympathetic character and also to hype up this conflict between Harry and his brother and, sort of paint this picture that they are two opposing sides and that Meghan and Harry are the ones that we need to feel the most for because they're the ones who have lost out and been victimized the most. I was more skeptical than anything as I was reading. But part 3 was very flowery, over the top about how Meghan is the greatest thing since sliced cheese. He describes his relationship with her very differently from how he describes his relationship with his other romantic partners, which I thought was odd. there's a lot of conflict and tension between William and Harry in part 3 that I just have to question how much of this is really real, or are we fabricating and exaggerating certain parts of this. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have fought, and I'm not saying that if William felt that Meghan was being rude to the staff and that her demeanor was not becoming, I'm not saying that he wouldn't have confronted her on that, because I do believe that he would have confronted her like, hey, that's not how we get down over here. There were reports that the Queen even had to speak to her when she was still alive and let Meghan know that that's not how we address people, that's not protocol, please get yourself in line. So I believe that. I just think that some of these stories have been exaggerated to make for drama in part 3 of Spare. I think that it's very clear that Meghan and Harry were they were really banking on this idea of coming away from Spare and the Netflix special, for that matter, which I think there were 2, right? Wasn't there the special and then there was a documentary? I don't know. We got rid of Netflix last year when everybody else got rid of Netflix, so I don't watch it anymore. But I'm pretty sure that coming off of these media projects that they had done where they tell their story from their own perspective, I think they were trying to come away from it as these righteous heroes who are standing up against injustice, especially racial injustice, that they were unfairly treated by the palace, by the crown, by everybody who surrounds them and are their little media cronies, because apparently, based on what Harry shares in Spare, he says that parts of the royal family are very good friends with parts of the media in order to make sure that the coverage of the royal family is positive at all times. Again, I think that that's probably true, because we don't really see very much coming out about the royal family, and they don't usually like to issue statements. But I think that he exaggerated quite a bit of this in order to make it seem more dramatic in part 3 of Spare. And the basic conclusion that I've come to is that it seems like these two got their feelings hurt because of some bad headlines, and because everyone wasn't jumping for joy and acting like, it was the first coming of Christ or things like that when Meghan came into the family, when they got married. I think that their family was accepting of Meghan. I think that they were welcoming and warm to her until they saw that Meghan had an agenda that she was interested in, and she wanted to use her status as a royal in order to get clout in Hollywood, which would be a conflict for the crown. If you're a working royal, then that's what you are. You're a working royal. You don't get to also go and star in movies and do reality TV series. If that was the case, then quite honestly, I think we would have seen William and Kate do that first, because they were the first couple that, of the newer generation, that got married. They were of the age that, they would have been like Harry and I are the same age. William is, I don't remember how many years older, 2 or 3, and Kate's around the same age as him. They would have been more of like the it thing around 2002, 2003 to pitch a reality series to, right? When reality TV was really heating up, it was very popular, and the two of them were dating, and they were 2 hot people who were, having a relationship. It seems like that would have been the time for somebody to approach anyone in the royal family with a reality show if it was going to happen. But, I think that Meghan had ideas for how she was going to spin this. She wanted to be treated as somebody who was special. She wanted to use her racial identity as a mixed race woman who part of her DNA comes from a black person. I think she wanted to use her racial identity as sort of a stool to step up on and use it to her advantage. In that way, she's no different from Kim Kardashian, in my opinion, because she uses racial issues for clout, simply. When she sat in front of Oprah when she was pregnant in 2021, she told Oprah that there were people in the family who were questioning how dark Archie's skin was going to be. Prince Harry has since done interviews and claimed, no, we never said that anybody in the royal family was racist. We never claimed that anybody was treating us that way. That was the media that said that. No, I think that you guys said that, and then you didn't realize what backlash you were going to receive from that, because that's a very serious accusation, especially in the 2020s. We are in modern times now. And when the heat came swiftly back for people wanting receipts, wanting evidence of who said this, what was the conversation like, and, give us some proof of this, name some names. That's when they started to scramble, because I don't believe that conversation ever really happened. And if that conversation came up, I think that it was more in the vein of ooh, I wonder what Archie will look like considering his genetic makeup, which is something that most families of mixed race people talk about before the baby gets here. When my husband and I had our kids, both sides of our family speculated, you know, like, wouldn't it be funny if they came out with green eyes? And I wonder how curly their hair is going to be and things like that. Nothing that was mean-spirited or racist. So my white in-laws were not like, oh, how dark are those kids going to be and things like that. No, they were just speculating about like, ooh, I wonder what sorts of genes are going to pop up in these babies, because it's true. Genetics are funny like that. Sometimes a gene that your grandparent carried can sometimes show up in your child with them having a different eye color or having freckles or having a specific type of hair, things like that. All of that is very normal and part of the human experience, but again, like so many things in Spare, it seems like that's being used and amplified and exaggerated in order to create drama and somehow make the listeners and the readers feel more sympathetic for Meghan and Harry and their story. And honestly, I just get the sense that the two of them got their feelings hurt and now they want to cry about it. Meghan didn't like the coverage that she was getting by the press at certain points, and because she's trying to also do this red carpet Hollywood lifestyle, because, you know, that's what she comes from as an actress, she was frustrated with that. She tried to control, still they are trying to control this situation by doing PR stunts. This book itself was a PR stunt, all of the press leading up to it. I think that if this book had been just published on its own and they hadn't done all of the fanfare and stuff leading up to it, Spare wouldn't have been so bad. Because, I mean, 2/3 of it were really good to listen to. It was the last part that I was just, oh gosh. It wasn't believable. It was exaggerated. It was over the top. There were so many notes that I made here about the discrepancies between the things that they were saying versus what I know was actually happening or what was reported to have actually happened. I didn't go over every single one of them in this video, but you can rest assured that there are definitely inconsistencies in Spare if you decide to pick it up and read it for yourself or give it a listen. And I wanted to also kind of weigh in here because, as I mentioned at the start of this video, I am an author, a publisher, and a ghostwriter. And so as somebody who works in this industry and observing the way that Spare was talked about prior to being published, the way that it launched, and then some of the aftermath of its launch with people receiving it, I have to say that I think that Harry probably could have done without all of the comparisons and without all of the exaggerations. I think that Part 3 especially seems like it was rushed. It seems like it was put together in such a way to make sure Meghan looks nice and sounds nice throughout this, and make sure people understand that the royal family wasn't being fair and that they were buddy-buddy with the press who was responsible for some of these headlines. But again, I didn't see where there was a physical threat to Harry, Meghan, or their children. Yes, the paparazzi found them when they went to Canada. They found them when they went to Hollywood. They have found them all over the place, but no one is actually brandishing guns at them or, you know, threatening to stab them face to face and holding a knife as they say these things. They're just some salacious headlines that Harry and Meghan don't care for, and paparazzi showing up in places where they don't want them to be. But as far as I know, neither one of those things are illegal, and those are things that all of the other royals have had to deal with as well. I don't see the equivalency there for there being some sort of a physical threat on their lives when it's just the paparazzi doing what the paparazzi does and the media doing what it does and talking smack. So please let me know, did you listen to Spare or read Spare? What were your thoughts on it? I know that people have been pretty divided. I've seen plenty of commentary that talks about, yes, I am with them 100%. I support Harry and Meghan, and I'm so glad that they left. I've also seen commentary where people are pointing out every single discrepancy that's in this book and why it just wasn't a good look for people. I personally, seeing all of the headlines, listening to some of the commentary myself, I wanted to get a sense for what this book was about myself, so that's why I chose to listen to the audiobook. As mentioned before, I didn't actually buy the book, so I was able to listen to it through Libby for free, and I probably would never buy this book. I listened to it once, and that's going to be the last time that I listen to it. If we ever do get Netflix again, I doubt I'll watch any of the documentaries or anything that's been done on, Harry and Meghan because I'm just not that interested. Personally, I don't think that their life is requiring the type of urgency that they seem to want to make us feel, that, you know, they're always in danger and someone's gonna hurt them and, oh, my poor kids, and they talked about my blackness. Like, okay, stop. You got your feelings hurt a little bit, and you are only just now, Meghan, starting to come into recognizing and embracing your blackness, and so you don't quite know how to embody and also protect your blackness. Honey, if you're gonna get upset at every little thing that people say to you, then you're probably gonna be collapsing on the floor crying quite a bit, which he mentions that like 5 or 6 times, that he found her collapsed on the floor and crying, collapsed on the floor and crying, just collapsed. I came home from work and she was collapsed on the floor and crying. I don't get it. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Please also, if you enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching to the end. Comment in the comments below. Comment star fragment if you're still here at the end. I've got Zelda on my mind. I'm going to probably go play Breath of the Wild in a little bit. So please comment that if you listen to the whole thing. I appreciate you. Please make sure that you like and subscribe. I'm back at this YouTube thing, so I'm trying to grow my following here. So I'd love it if you stuck around. And please do let me know your thoughts. I'm not saying everybody has to agree with me. Everybody has to come away with the same opinions as me. I did my own research by listening to the book myself, and then I formed my own commentary. So thank you so much. Take care, and I'll be talking to you soon.